for anyone watching this, page 37 on the universal one. That is where there is a list of all the dimensions. So today we are doing the fifth dimension, known as sex. All right, so the dimension of sex is actually a pretty simple one. Walter talks about, he says, all thinking is creative thinking. All thinking is creating that which it is thinking. I liked that quote. Now, in terms of his concept of the dimension of sex, remember, these are dimensions of motion. Okay. And so I'm going to read a little bit to you guys. Well, actually, before I read, I'm just going to say in general, Walter's concept of sex means opposites. Okay. And, he talks about gravitation and he talks about radiation as the two forces of the universe. And, as we've talked about previously, those two forces are going to cause light to move in a certain way. The gravitation force is going to cause light to spiral in a centripetal spiral, a centripetal closing spiral, like we imagine water going down the sink or the bathtub. And then the force of radiation is the opposite force. It's going to cause light to spiral in a centrifugal expanding spiral. So the life cycle of all things that come into being and then go out of being, or that are born and live and then die, is that they follow this path of the gravitative path of things coming together until they reach the amplitude of the wave at the corner of the cube. And then they start to die and they expand back out into the ashes or the nothingness, dust to dust. Now, Walter describes it as light. He says everything, is light. The point is, we're mainly today talking about sex, and sex division is essentially the two forces and the difference of them, the gravitative force and the radiative force, and this one type of spiral and the other type of spiral. All right, so let me share my screen and pull up some diagrams to show this. Okay, so you guys should be seeing that colorful. Okay, good. Scott's giving me the thumbs up. So, right, this is, a kind of zoomed in portion of Walter's periodic table. Okay, and we can see, the elements. There is the red side and there is the green side, or sometimes he calls it the blue side. And they are, and actually, if you see my little hand here, we're going to look at neon, the inert gas of neon, which is on this inertial plane line. You can see also helium is another inert gas. Okay. And, Walter sometimes refers to the inert gases as, or this plane here, the inertial plane, or sometimes he calls it the cathode plane. Okay. Like in his book, Atomic Suicide, which we were just talking about earlier off of the recording. But so you'll notice that helium is here and then neon is also here. So if we look at neon, this inertial plane or cathode plane is where motion is going to start. And it is going to expand in two directions. One way is going to be the red side, going over here, sodium, magnesium, aluminum, silicon. The other direction is going to be the green side or blue side, which is, fluorine, oxygen, nitrogen, carbon. Okay. So this kind of S shape here is one wave. Okay. And so there is always going to be a a positive and negative, or a gravitative and radiative um, motion. And he describes the opposites by calling it sex. Like us as humans, we know about, male and female sex, right? And but Russell actually says that man's description of sex being only in like organic, like beings, like animals or humans or whatever. He's like, that's not actually totally accurate. He's like, the concept of sex goes all up and down the entire periodic table. And so even inorganic materials have sex. Okay. As he shows here on his periodic table, um, the concept of the red side, that would be the male side. So, magnesium and sodium and aluminum, these are male sexed elements. Whereas on the other side, fluorine, your oxygen, your nitrogen, these are what he calls female um, elements. Now, the reason he does that, he says that everything that is gravitating has to also radiate. And so essentially, all things are both male and female. They're just more preponderantly one or the other. As it goes through its kind of life cycle, initially it's male because it is gravitating together. It is initially preponderantly male. It will then, as it gravitates together until it reaches the 4 plus position, that is when the reversal starts to happen, and it will become it will go from preponderantly male in sex to it becomes preponderantly female in sex. And so because of that, it will start to disintegrate and go and spread out and go back to the inertial plane where it started. And so everything in the universe, not just animals or humans, everything, he says, has a sex. And he says everything is both male and female, but it's just preponderantly one or the other, preponderantly meaning more of. So it's like it's more male than female, and then it becomes more female than male. That's kind of the life cycle of motion. And so he, so the reason this is one of the dimensions of motion is because it's important for any kind of motion that we look at. We are going to be, we're going to be looking at all the different dimensions of that motion. And one of the important dimensions is the dimension of sex. That's how we know when we look at something or the motion of something, that's how we know whether it's coming together, like that it's male, it's preponderantly male coming together, or it's female, which means it's preponderantly female and therefore it's coming apart. Okay. So that's kind of the simple version of sex. It's just, and so let me show you another diagram here. Hold on. Let's see. Where is this from? I believe this is from Atomic Suicide. I could be wrong. Anyway, this is a diagram that Russell is showing sex division, in an electric current. So this way he's talking red and blue. Later on, he turned it to red and green. But the idea here is that the sex division will always be kind of in this order, red, blue, red, blue, red, blue, red, blue. That's in A. Now in B, he's like, you'll never find in nature where it will go like this: red, blue, red, blue, blue, red, red, blue. See, this one, it's turned around so that it's wrong. So the blue is against the blue and the red is against the red. He's like, no, that's not how it works. He goes a little further down here. We're going to look at C and D. So now he's showing the spirals. Okay. And he's showing like the direction that it's spiraling. Okay. Now, the way that it always works, this should all be.
On page 183. Oh, there we are. Page 183, atomic suicide.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you. Right. Oh, yeah. Yeah, 183. Okay. Sorry. I think I lost you guys there for a little bit. So it says my internet connection is unstable. I'm going to go back and kind of say again what I think maybe was missed. Sorry if it's a repeat. Okay. So essentially, he showed the red, blue, red, blue, red, blue. He shows that, nature will never it will never like reverse one of these, and be like red, blue, blue, red, red, blue, like, because the opposites of sex is always there because motion has a universal direction. So even the spirals here, they're all going to go the same direction. Here in line D, he's showing, oh, what if we flipped it around so that it'd be like the direction going this way, but no, this one goes reverse and then reverse. Like he's just showing that doesn't happen. Um, Here's one more way to look at it. Now he's showing it kind of in like three dimensions. He's showing the cathode planes and he's showing the spirals here. And so, this side would be father, this side would be mother, then this side would be father, and then this side would be mother. And then he's showing down here on F that you would not have a violation of sex division in the wave like this. It wouldn't be father, mother, mother, father. Like, the mother and mother are not going to be like that. Or the blue and the blue are not going to be together. It's always an opposite. And that is shown in the periodic table and the formula of the locked potentials. The red side is always going to be the plus 1, +2, +3. The green side or blue side is always going to be the minus, -3, -2, -1. And there's always, at the equilibrium point, if there's positive on one side, there's negative on the other side, or, male on one side and female on the other side. That is just the sex division. And so that's just one of the dimensions for us to know. That's how it's like. It's pretty simple. Okay. It's pretty, pretty basic that there's just, if we keep in mind the, the different sex. And I like to really talk about it in terms of gravitation and radiation. I always go back to gravitation and radiation to try to clarify things. Now let's see. Reading from the universal one. He says, this is a universe of reproduction of idea in accumulated potential of the constant of energy, of registration of the soul of idea in inertia, and of reproduction of accumulated potential. The idea of all things is produced by union of opposite actions and reactions under conditions favorable to union, and is reproduced only under similar conditions. Equal and opposite actions and reactions, when united, are satisfied in their unions and will remain united. Stable unions will always reproduce true to species. Unequal and opposite actions and reactions, when united, are unsatisfied in their unions and will always seek their true tonal mates. Unsatisfied unions are unstable unions. Unstable unions never reproduce true to species. Unstable unions tend to return to their separate tonal states. If either mate in an unstable union finds a more equal mate, it will always leave the former and go to the latter. That which is true of chemical unions is true of all species of organic life. Now, that right there is like, now he is bringing it. First, he talks about, the whole entire universe when he's talking about just like um, elements and how they have their mates and they match. But he's literally also saying, well, hey, you know, my laws of motion are universal. So even when you talk about like human beings, like there could be two people who are a couple, a male and a female. In this case, I'm talking a male and a female, and they might be, kind of together. They're not quite, right for each other, but hey, there's no one else around. So they're kind of together. But then comes along someone who's a more perfect mate and someone is going to get left and go to this other perfect mate. Okay. So I like to bring that up because I think it's funny. But the point here though is like that all elements, all material matter has this dimension of sex. And and I think he used the term sex because kind of people can understand that, at least, in terms of when Walter Russell was alive, everyone kind of knew, oh, okay, male and female. There's a man and there's a woman, and they can be mates and they can reproduce. Okay, they can have babies. And he talks about it in terms of chemical, and I do want to read this. So here is sodium in the sixth octave at the +1 position. Okay. So on the male half of the wave. So it wants to mate with the female half of the wave. So he's saying, consider selenium. Selenium is on the female half of the wave at a -2. So you got a +1 and a -2. They will kind of come together. Now he says, but if we introduce iodine, which is in the eighth octave, 801. He calls it 801 because that means it's the eighth octave and the number one position. Um, and it's negative. So it's female. So he's saying if you bring in iodine in the eighth octave, it will cause sodium to leave selenium and combine with iodine to form the more stable compound sodium iodine. And what he's saying here is that you had a compound that was +1 and -2, but now you're replacing it with a +1 and a -1. So it's going to be more stable. The 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 position of -1 is more of a true mate to the position of +1 versus the position of +1 and the position of -2. And that's just because the -1 position is lower potential. The -2 position is a higher potential. And mates want to be similar. So, so a +1 and a -2 is not going to be as stable as a +1 and a -1. Now, he says, now you bring in bromine, which is the seventh octave instead of the eighth octave. It's going to it's going to leave iodine to form sodium bromide. Now that means you've got the sixth octave +1 and the eighth octave -1. Now you're bringing in bromine, which is in the seventh octave -1. Bromine is going to cause iodine to get pushed to the side because the octave is closer. The seventh octave is closer to the sixth octave than the eighth octave. And so bromine is a more true mate because it's closer in octave. Now, finally, and last but not least, if you bring in chlorine, which is right here, which is also in the sixth octave and -1, you have the true mate of sodium, +1 in the sixth octave and -1 in the sixth octave. Sodium chloride is sodium and chlorine are the true mates of each other. So bromine will get kicked to the curb, and it will form the very stable compound that we know of as sodium chloride, or salt. And no element of any other octave whatsoever can displace chlorine from its union with sodium. Chemically, every element is both alkaline and acid, but it is preponderantly one or the other. All male electropositive elements are preponderantly alkaline, and all female elements are preponderantly acidic or acid. Okay. So sex is something that is important. This kind of goes into Walter's chemistry, but by knowing this dimension of motion, it allows us to kind of understand things better. Okay. So, once again, this is just, I'm just kind of, this is kind of the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot more to read in the Universal One about sex, and as well in, like in Atomic Suicide, of how sex is an important dimension. But just for you guys' understanding, that's what sex is. It is the opposites of motion in terms of gravitative coming together, which is male, versus radiative or spreading apart, which is female. That is the dimension of sex. And it's just something that we need to know about, when we're analyzing the motion of light and the motion of things. And yeah, like definitely later, I'm sure we'll get into, chemistry stuff. Let me see if there's anything else that needs to be said about that. Yeah, I'll read this one little part. I mean, this is more kind of chemistry, but, he says, the alkaline male actions, when united with equal and opposite acid female reactions, are neutralized. They become salts. Alkaline male actions, united with unequal acid female reactions, accentuate the acidity or alkalinity. Hydrogen, united with its true mate, helianon, becomes a neutral salt. Okay, so he's saying, oh, what's up, Kirsty? Could
So we could think of the neutral salts who don't really want to react with anyone else as being like the inert gases of the sexually active world.
Yeah, exactly. Because
Yeah.
they have neutralized each other perfect. Like they're the true mates. They've neutralized each other perfectly, so that it's like they're back at equilibrium. You know. Um. Now, so hydrogen and fluorine will unite as an acid. So we see hydrogen here at the +4 position, and we see fluorine here at the -1. In the next octave up. He says they will unite, as an acid. But then he says hydrogen and chlorine. Now, where's chlorine? Chlorine is at the -1, but a higher octave up, the sixth octave. He says hydrogen and chlorine will unite as a stronger acid. And so that's kind of, I guess that's less about sex and more about the octaves. But just I thought it would be something interesting to share because I mean Russell has an entire chemistry like of how elements come together, and it's all of the dimensions and how they interact with each other, the plane, the potential, the sex, et cetera, et cetera. So but yeah, so I think that's it in terms of sex. It's in Walter's concept, it is literally just the difference of centripetal spiral motion of things coming together gravitatively, that is male, versus the opposite, which is the centrifugal spiral of things coming apart, which is female. The male is on the red side of the spectrum. The female is the green side or the blue side of the spectrum. So let's see. That's it for that. There were some other interesting things we were talking about today. Let's see, we got about 4 minutes left, and let me see if I can pull that up. We did talk a little bit, off of the recording. We talked a little bit. I wanted to show this. This is the wave. This is how, that people normally think of the wave as like this section going from A, over here to A, or, to this A, like the wave like this. But Walter is saying, no, actually, this little S kind of shape or backwards S shape, this is the wave. It starts at this equilibrium and it splits. One half of it goes up towards this corner. The other half goes down towards this corner, and what does that mean in terms of a three-dimensional? Here it is. Here's that wave. So we've got, it starts in the middle. One half spirals up towards this corner of the cube. The other half spirals down towards this corner of the cube. Okay. And then it spirals right back to the middle where it came from. That's the life cycle of motion. Goes to the corner and then back to the center. And we briefly talked about the cubic wave field, about how in every cubic wave field, this is the motion that's happening, this pumping motion of the light going from the center, going to the corner, and then going back to the center again. It's like, he calls it like little pumps. Oh, and I should show the one other thing. Here's the other thing that we talked about. This is how he says a wave forms. Imagine this right here is the surface, representing the surface of, like, say, a water, like a pond or something, or a pool. You throw the rock in, it's going to hit at D. When it hits at D, all of these things are like harmonics at E. And this is going through time. Time 1 is up here, time 2 is here, time 3 is here. Now these waves start forming. Time 4 is here. You can see the little wave. Time 5, you can see more of the wave. And then finally, time 6, the waves actually crash, like this wave that's here and this wave that's here meet at the amplitude right here. And that's how we kind of see the wave, that we see the ripples on the pond. It's really the crest and the trough. But this is the one wave. This is what he calls the wave. And he shows it again right here. It's this. This is the wave. Okay, guys, let's see. My alarm is going off here. Let's see how much more time we have. All right, we got about 1 minute. Kirsty also asked a question, and we just didn't get to it. But it was about how the periodic table is 9 octaves. It is 10 octaves in the universal one, and then it becomes 9 octaves. And I'm sorry, we kind of got off track. I realize now that we never answered that on the recording. So maybe we can start there, next time. Because she asked, are we losing elements because he turned it from 10 octaves to 9? But no, we didn't. But we don't have time now to finish that. But we will go back to that next time. All right, guys. Have a good night. It was a pleasure talking with you guys. We'll see you next time. I really appreciate you guys. Bye.